Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and public policy. We're broadcast on KGPT, channel 26.1, also its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me for my blog, The Voice for Liberty. It's on the internet at wichitaliberty.org. There the motto is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. I cover things that may not be covered by other news media in Wichita and Kansas, or if we do cover the same news, I'll do it from the perspective of economic freedom, limited government, and individual liberty, because these are the things we know that are important, and these are the things that are also so often under attack by our government, be it at the federal, state, or local level. So, please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter I send a couple times a week. And if you want to contact me, you'll find my email address there, or just remember, bob.weeks@gmail.com. Well, I'd like to talk to you about accounting, specifically depreciation. Now, please don't change channels. I know this may be boring, but our government officials depend on your lack of interest and involvement in order to do what they want. They count on you not being interested in details like what I want to present to you. In particular, I want to explain how proper attention given to the depreciation expense of the Intrust Bank Arena in downtown Wichita would recognize and account for the sacrifices of the people of Sedgwick County and its visitors to pay for the arena. This would be a business-like way of accounting, but it's a well-hidden secret. Our leaders don't want you to know the true story, but I'll tell it to you. Well, Sedgwick County owns the Intrust Bank Arena, and the county promotes a revenue-sharing agreement between the county and SMG, the company that operates the arena. Each year, a calculation is made, and the result of that is called profit or loss. But this arrangement is not an accurate and complete accounting, and it hides the true economics of the arena. What's missing is depreciation expense. Now, an example of the incomplete editorializing on this issue comes from Rhonda Holman of the Wichita Eagle, who recently opined, though great news for taxpayers, that oversized check for $255,678 presented to Sedgwick County last week reflected Intrust Bank Arena's past, specifically the county's share of 2013 profits. And earlier reporting on this topic in the Wichita Eagle did not mention depreciation expense either. Now, there are at least two ways of looking at the finances of the arena. Most attention is given to this profit, or maybe loss, earned by the arena for the county according to an operating and management agreement between the county and SMG, the company that operates the arena. This agreement specifies a revenue-sharing mechanism between the county and SMG. And for 2013, the accounting method used in this agreement produced a profit of about $705,000 to be split, not equally, but split between SMG and the county. The county's share, as Rhonda Holman noted earlier, was about $255,000. And presumably that's after deducting the cost of producing an oversized check for the television cameras. Now, while described as profit by county officials, this payment does not represent any sort of profit or earnings in the usual sense. In fact, the introductory letter that accompanies these calculations warns readers that these are not intended to be a complete presentation of Intrust Bank Arena's financial position and results of operations, and are not intended to be presentation in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. Well, I think that bears repeating. This is not a reckoning of profit and loss in any recognized sense. It bears little resemblance to the actual economics of what has happened. It is simply an agreement between Sedgwick County and SMG as to how SMG is to be paid and how the county participates. Well, a much better reckoning of the economics of the interest bank arena can be found in the 2013 version of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for Sedgwick County. This document holds additional information about the finances of the interest bank arena. The CAFR, as described by the county, is a review of what occurred financially at Sedgwick County in 2013. In that respect, it is a report card of our ability to manage our financial resources. And regarding the arena, this financial report says the arena had an operating loss of $4.7 million. The loss can be attributed to $5.3 million in depreciation expense. And financial statements in the same document show that $5.3 million was in fact charged for depreciation in 2013, bringing accumulated depreciation since the arena opened to a total of about $21 million. Depreciation expense is not something that is paid out in cash. Sedgwick County did not write a check for $5.3 million in depreciation expense. Instead, accounting for depreciation provides a way to recognize and account for the cost of long-lived assets over their lifespan. It provides a way to recognize opportunity costs, that is, what could be done with our resources if not spent on the arena. But some people don't recognize this. In years past, Sedgwick County Commissioner Dave Unruh made remarks that show the severe misunderstanding that he and almost everyone labor under regarding the nature of the spending on the arena. He said, "I want to underscore the fact that the citizens of Sedgwick County voted to pay for this facility in advance. And so not having debt service on it is just a huge benefit to our government and to the citizens, so we can go forward without having to worry about making those payments and still show positive cash flow. So it's a great benefit to our community, and I'm still pleased with this report." That was Sedgwick County Commissioner Dave Unruh. Now, the contention of Unruh and most others, such as the Wichita Eagle editorial board, is that the capital investment of $183 million on the arena is merely a historical artifact. It's something that happened in the past, something that has no bearing today. There is no opportunity cost according to his view. This attitude, however, disrespects the sacrifices of the people of Sedgwick County and its visitors to raise those funds. Any honest accounting or reckoning of the performance of Interest Bank Arena must take depreciation expense into account. While Commissioner Unruh is correct in that depreciation expense is not a cash expense that affects cash flow, it is an economic fact that cannot be ignored. Well, except by politicians, it seems. And we see our governmental and civic leaders all the time telling us that we must run government like a business. But when given the opportunity to account for government like a real business would, they don't do that. At least not in a public way. Instead, they present an accounting fiction that bears no economic connection to profit in a business sense. But they tell us it is profit. And to learn the truth, you have to dig through documents like comprehensive annual financial reports. Without frank and realistic discussion of numbers like this and the economic facts they represent, we make decisions based on incomplete and false information. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, each Friday I drive to downtown Wichita for lunch. And a few weeks ago, I showed you photographs of streetlights burning in the bright noon sunshine. But last week, I saw something different. Now, these lights that you're viewing right now, they're at the corner of Broadway and Douglas. And they're not really streetlights. They're not as tall and bright. They instead illuminate sidewalk benches. But notice that this week, 2 of the 4 lights are not lit, and I imagine they're probably burnt out from being turned on 24 hours a day. But to its credit, the city is really watching out for your safety. To compensate for these two burnt-out lights in the middle of the day, the city switched on the nearby street lights, all of them for an entire city block. Now, the street lights illustrated in these photographs and others I've shown you are competing very strongly with the sun to illuminate Wichita streets in the middle of sunny days. And undoubtedly, these examples of waste represent a small portion of total city spending. But you don't have to look very hard to find waste like this. And we know that small examples of waste are multiplied many times. So when city leaders tell us that there is nowhere left to cut in the budget, that everything that can be done to trim the fat has already been done, and that the only thing we can do is raise taxes, well, think of these photographs. Now, this is not to say that waste like this does not occur in the private sector. Of course it does. But businesses and individuals have a powerful incentive to avoid waste that is not present in government. That is, that businesses and people are spending their own money. The government bureaucrats in charge of these streetlights are spending someone else's money. They are working within a system where there is no profit motive and little fear of losses. Correspondingly, there is little accountability. So, is there a solution to this problem? Why don't we simply hire a better, more diligent class of bureaucrats to staff City Hall? Well, the problem is not the people. The problem is the system. The problem is the type of incentives that are in play. Now, there are some who believe that city streets could be sold to business firms in the private sector. Everyone complains about traffic and the conditions of our streets. And I remember maybe 10 years ago when Central was undergoing an improvement project near Woodlawn. The merchants were complaining that the lack of access, or the inconvenient access, was hurting business. And these complaints are especially bitter when merchants see no work being done for long stretches of days. Why can't the city work diligently until the project is finished, they wonder. Now, we can all understand that at times maybe concrete has to set for a few days, and of course the weather can cause delays and problems. But I'm sure you've seen examples when road construction projects are left idle for long stretches for no apparent reason. Well, let me ask you this. Who has better incentive to improve and maintain streets but the merchants who rely on them to deliver customers? So what if the merchants own the streets in front of their stores? Now, in some sense, the merchants do own these streets. They own a share of them just as they own a share of the streets across town. But merchants in Central and Woodlawn don't care as deeply for the streets at Ridge Road and Central as they do care for the streets right in front of their stores. So, instead of this extremely diluted ownership of streets by everyone, for the common good, of course, why couldn't merchants own the streets right in front of their stores? They already own their parking lots, which are essential to business in most cases, so why could they not also own the streets? Now, I can hear the objections. Won't greedy merchants put up toll gates and charge everyone to drive on the little section of street that they own? Well, merchants right now could charge customers for parking in the lots that they own, but very few do. Instead, the goal of most merchants is to have lots of traffic in their parking lots, and it would be the same for the streets in front of their stores. Merchants would be welcoming traffic on their streets. Their goal would be to make the streets welcoming and convenient. Now, another objection I can sense. Won't some merchants neglect maintenance of the streets that they own so that they can earn higher profits? Well, some merchants don't maintain the parking lots that they own, or their buildings for that matter. Now, that savings might allow them to earn higher profits. But in competitive markets, when the price of something is the same, customers generally prefer paid parking lots and well-maintained stores and restaurants. We might as well ask, why do any merchants spend any money maintaining and improving their facilities? But some people do prefer a low price. For them, merchants who skimp on maintenance can offer lower prices. That's a choice. Well, isn't it curious, the difference between government and the private sector? Visit the Wichita Airport, Wichita City Hall, or the Sedgwick County Courthouse, and you're going to pay to park. Well, I've got a tip for you, though. I found that most offices in City Hall or the courthouse will validate your parking ticket if you ask. But we've been taught, conditioned, that government must own the city streets. Then we all complain about them. And in Wichita, citizens paid billions in taxes for streets to be built. Now City Hall tells us that we need to have a higher sales tax to catch up with the maintenance of these streets. Well, here's another difference between government and the private sector. Government sees street maintenance as a burden. It puts off maintenance because, as Wichita Mayor Carl Brewer recently said about this and other similar issues, such as maintenance of water and sewer infrastructure, he said, "We've put them off for too long. We didn't want the challenges. We didn't want the tax bills. But now, to maintain our quality of life, we've got to catch up." Well, did you hear that? The mayor of Wichita tells us that maintaining the assets that you paid for with your taxes is a challenge that the city put off for too long. The private sector, on the other hand, sees maintaining and improving physical assets as an opportunity to gain customers and earn profits. And there's also the concept of personal ownership, as summed up by the saying, "No one washes a rented car." The government streets and infrastructure, being owned by everyone in common, instead are treated as though they are owned by no one. Now, there's a quote by Joseph Sobrand that applies here, I think, but I'm not sure precisely how. But here's what he wrote. He wrote, "The measure of the state's success is that the word anarchy frightens people, while the word state does not." Now, Webster's dictionary gives the definition of anarchy that most people think of, which is a situation of confusion and wild behavior in which the people in a country, group, organization, etc. are not controlled by rules or laws. Now, that's what government wants us to think. Government wants us to believe that we are dependent on government, and government alone, for many of the things we need. If we diminish the government sector in favor of the private sector, and that's really what anarchy means, well, we would increase civil society. That's where things are done through voluntary cooperation rather than by government coercion, even city streets. So when we see the city of Wichita burning streetlights in the middle of the day, week after week, recognize that this is just a small window into a larger problem. And as the city of Wichita asks voters to approve a higher sales tax, part of which will go towards catching up with the things the city has put off because it did not want the challenges, remember things like this, both the small and the large. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, have you been told that property taxes in Wichita and Kansas are low? Well, that's partially true. But an ongoing study reveals that generally property taxes on commercial and industrial property in Wichita are high. In particular, taxes on commercial property in Wichita are among the highest in the nation. Now, the study I refer to is produced by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in conjunction with the Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence, and it's titled 50 State Property Tax Comparison Study, and the most recent version is from March of this year. It may be found on the internet, and the study uses a variety of residential, apartment, commercial, and industrial property scenarios to analyze the nature of property taxation across the country. And I gathered data from the selected tables for Wichita. I'll present some of the data to you now, but you can find a link to the complete document along with the summary table I've created of data relating to Wichita, of course, on my website, The Voice for Liberty at wichitaliberty.org. It's important to understand the difference between the appraised value of property and the assessed value. Appraised value is the market value, at least as determined by the tax assessor. Assessed value is what is multiplied by the mill levy rates of various taxing jurisdictions in order to compute the tax owed. Now in Kansas, residential property is assessed at 11.5% of its appraised value. So to compute your tax, you'd take the appraised value, again that's the market value or something approximating it, multiply it by 11.5% and you produce the assessed value. Then you'd multiply that by the mill levy rates for each of the taxing jurisdictions the property is within, like the city, county, school district, state, fire district, cemetery district, drainage district, improvement district, library district, country club improvement district, self-supported municipal improvement district, and so forth. While residential property is appraised at 11.5% of appraised value, commercial property is assessed at 25% of appraised value and public utility property at 33%. Now this means that commercial property pays 2.18 times the property tax rate as residential property. The U.S. average for this ratio is 1.716. Now, whether higher assessment ratios on commercial property as compared to residential property is good public policy, well, that's a subject for debate. But because Wichita's ratio is high, it leads to high property taxes on commercial property as compared to the nation. Now, for residential property taxes, such as on your home, Wichita ranks below the national average. For a property valued at $150,000, the effective property tax rate in Wichita is 1.324%, while the national average is 1.508%. And the results for a property valued at $300,000 were similar. Looking at commercial property, the study uses several different scenarios with different total values and different values for fixtures. For example, for a $100,000 valued property with $20,000 in fixtures, the study found that the national average for property tax was $2,591, or 2.159% of the property value. But for Wichita, the corresponding values are $3,588, or 2.990%, and that ranks ninth from the top amongst the states. Wichita property taxes for this scenario are 38.5% higher than the national average. Now, in other scenarios with larger property values, Wichita performs similarly with property taxes substantially higher than the national average. Now, when we consider different scenarios of industrial property, we find that Wichita taxes are lower, again, when compared to other states and cities. For urban industrial property, often Wichita is near the national average or slightly below. And as the proportion of property value that is machinery and equipment increases, Wichita ranks better on property taxes. And that's because Kansas no longer taxes business machinery and equipment. Now, a few weeks ago, you remember how I showed you that Wichita city officials and bureaucrats say that the city has only a small budget for economic development incentives. Now, as far as cash that can be spent, that may be true. But one of the things that Wichita often does is to forgive the payment of these property taxes, which you can see are high for commercial and industrial property. This has no cash cost to the city, but it does to taxpayers who must make up the difference, and it's many millions of dollars per year. Now, I'm in favor of government receiving less tax revenue. That leaves more in the productive private sector. But when the city of Wichita says that Company A must pay property taxes and Company B does not have to pay, well, the city takes on the role of master planner. The city is telling us that it knows better how to spend and invest than do people when spending and investing their own money. And as we've seen for many reasons on Wichita Liberty TV, planning and directing an economy is something government is poorly positioned to do. Short time horizons, lack of knowledge, perverse incentives, corruption, both real and petty. These are some of the reasons that government is not equipped to plan and manage the economy. But it seems that our leaders in Wichita are firmly convinced, despite past and present failures, that only government action can save Wichita. Though we can easily identify problems in Wichita that government is solely responsible for creating, like the high taxes on commercial property in Wichita. That's something the city could immediately fix. Reduce tax rates for everyone. But then, government would have less power and influence, and the people would have more. That goes against the grain of most politicians and bureaucrats. Well, that's another episode of Wichita Liberty TV. Thank you for watching. I'm Bob Weeks.